The waves outside my window had always been my lullaby, their steady rhythm against the rocks used to soothe every ache I carried from the world beyond. But that night, they sounded different. Restless. Angry. As if the ocean itself sensed the chaos about to erupt inside my home. You need to leave. Now. The words hung in the air like smoke. For a second, I thought I had misheard them. But when I turned, my sister's husband, Ethan, stood in the middle of my living room, tall, composed, and radiating the kind of arrogance that only comes from a man who believes he owns everything he touches. Behind him, my sister Lena sat on the edge of the sofa, hands clasped tightly together, eyes flickering between us like she wanted to dissolve into the furniture. The pale blue curtains behind her swayed gently in the sea breeze, mocking the tension in the room with their fragile calm. I blinked, stunned. I'm sorry, what did you just say? Ethan's expression didn't change. I said you need to leave. Tonight. I let out a dry laugh, though my heart had begun to pound. You're serious? This is my house, Ethan. I built it. I paid for every beam, every window, every grain of sand under these floors. He took a slow step closer, his voice dropping to that cold, measured tone I'd always hated. Not anymore, Arya. You lost that privilege when you couldn't handle your finances. You should have thought about that before disappearing for 2 years. Lena flinched at his words. Ethan, she whispered, but he ignored her. I stared at him, confusion tightening into anger. What are you talking about? This house is in my name. Not quite, he said, pulling a folded paper from his pocket and holding it up. According to this, it's ours now. Joint ownership. You remember when you couldn't keep up with the property taxes last year? Lena stepped in to help, and I made sure the paperwork reflected that. The words hit me like cold water. You changed the deed? Adjusted, he said smoothly, to protect the property. And now that we're using it for the summer, it's best if you stay somewhere else. You know, less drama. I turned to my sister, searching her face for some sign of denial, some sliver of truth that would make this nightmare dissolve. Lena, please tell me this isn't real. Her lips trembled. Arya, I didn't mean for it to happen this way. You were in the city after your divorce, and the taxes were piling up. The house was about to go into foreclosure, and Ethan said what? I snapped, my voice breaking. That he could swoop in and claim what isn't his? That's what you thought was helping. She looked down at her hands, tears filling her eyes. I just didn't want you to lose it. I wanted to believe her. God, I did. But Ethan's smirk told me everything I needed to know. This wasn't about saving the house. This was about control. About power. He spread his arms slightly, as if delivering the final blow. Look, it's late. You can come back next week once things settle down. But tonight, you're leaving. It took everything in me not to scream. My hands were shaking, my throat tight with rage I hadn't felt in years. But I refused to give him the satisfaction of seeing me break. You think you can push me out of my own home? I said quietly. You don't know who you're dealing with. He tilted his head, amused. Oh, I think I do. You're the woman who walked away from everything. Her marriage, her job, her family. You don't fight. You just run. For a moment, the sound of the waves filled the silence that followed. Then I stepped closer, close enough to see the flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. You're right, I said softly. I did walk away, but not because I was weak. Because I was tired of being trapped by people like you. His smirk faltered. I grabbed my coat from the hook by the door, turned to my sister, who looked as though she might collapse under the weight of what was happening, and said, Don't bother calling me until you find your voice again. Then I walked out. The night air was cool and sharp, thick with salt and storm clouds. My footsteps echoed on the wooden deck as I made my way to the car parked near the dunes. Behind me, the house glowed faintly, warm, golden, and distant. My house, the one place in the world that had felt like mine, now claimed by the man I trusted least. I drove until the lights of the coast disappeared behind me. The motel I stopped at was nothing special, peeling paint, a flickering sign that buzzed faintly in the humid air, but it offered me what I needed: silence. In the small room overlooking the restless sea, I sat on the bed and opened my laptop. Years of memories flashed before me: photos, invoices, saved documents. I found the original purchase contract, the tax receipts, every proof of ownership that bore only my name. And yet something about Ethan's confidence gnawed at me. I searched deeper. Old emails from my lawyer, bank statements, scanned property papers. And then, in one of the attachments from last year, I saw it, a version of the deed I didn't recognize. My signature was there, but something was wrong. It looked copied, unnaturally perfect. My stomach turned. Ethan had forged my name. I leaned back, staring at the ceiling, the weight of realization pressing down on me like a wave ready to break. All this time, I thought my sister's silence was guilt. But now I saw it: she was trapped, manipulated. I turned my gaze to the window, where the moonlight shimmered across the dark ocean. I'd spent years running, from my ex-husband's betrayal, from financial ruin, from disappointment. But something about this moment felt different. I was done running. If Ethan thought I would crumble, he was mistaken. Because the woman he remembered was gone. The one who had been left, cheated, underestimated. She had drowned long ago in those very waves outside the window. What remained now was something stronger, sharper. A storm of my own. As the tide roared beneath the cliffs, I whispered to the darkness, "You took my house, Ethan. But tonight, you woke me up. And I'm coming for everything you tried to steal." Outside, thunder rumbled over the horizon, low, distant, but unmistakably growing closer. It was as if the sea itself had heard my promise. The sea was black that night, heaving under a sky bruised with clouds. The air crackled with electricity, that strange tension before a storm breaks, the kind that makes every instinct whisper, "Something is coming."
So was I.
3 days had passed since Ethan threw me out of my own home. 3 days of silence from Lena. 3 days of gathering everything I needed. Every file, every legal record, every proof of my ownership. I hadn't eaten much, hadn't slept at all. But adrenaline had replaced exhaustion. I was running on purpose now. The wind whipped my hair across my face as I parked my car by the dunes. The beach house loomed ahead, lights glowing through the tall glass windows. My house, my safe place, now infested by the man who'd stolen everything I'd built. And tonight, he'd find out what it felt like to lose control. I stepped out of the car, my boots sinking slightly in the wet sand. The smell of rain mingled with salt. Lightning flashed over the horizon, illuminating the waves that slammed against the shore. The world was ready to break open. I walked up the wooden steps to the house. The familiar creak beneath my feet echoed memories of laughter, wine, and sisterly secrets. All of it shattered now. I didn't knock. I simply opened the door and stepped inside. Lena was in the kitchen, startled, her hands still wet from washing dishes. "Arya? Oh my God. Where is he?" I asked. My voice was calm, too calm. "Ethan's in the study." "Please, Arya, don't." But I was already walking. He was sitting at the oak desk, the same one my father had left me, scrolling through his phone, a glass of whiskey by his hand. When he saw me, he leaned back, that familiar smirk spreading across his face. "Well, look who came crawling back," he said. "Decided to make peace?" I placed a thick, sealed envelope on the desk between us. "Not quite." He raised an eyebrow. "What's this?" "Proof," I said, watching his smirk falter. "Proof that you forged my signature on the property transfer papers. I had it verified by a digital analyst. The original copies are in my lawyer's possession. I came here to give you a choice." His eyes narrowed.
"Choice?"
"Yes," I said evenly. "You can sign a statement returning the house to my name before midnight, or I can make sure you're in handcuffs by morning." For a heartbeat, he didn't speak. Then he chuckled, low and mocking. "You're bluffing. You think anyone will believe you? You've always been unstable, Arya. Even your own sister knows that." Lena appeared at the doorway, her voice trembling. "Ethan, stop it. Stay out of this," he snapped. Then, to me, "You wouldn't dare ruin your sister's life like that. She's tied to me. If I go down, she loses everything too." I met his gaze, my pulse steady despite the fury boiling beneath my skin. "You should have thought about that before using her to cover your crimes." Thunder cracked so loud it rattled the windows. The lights flickered. Rain began to pelt the glass, streaming down in silver sheets. Ethan stood, towering over me. "You think you're stronger now because you hired a lawyer? You're still the same pathetic woman who begged for help after your husband left." That name, Andrew, hung in the air like poison. The memory of that betrayal, of how Ethan had laughed about it behind my back years ago, burned through my veins. I stepped closer, my voice cold as the sea outside. "You've underestimated me your whole life. But tonight, you'll see exactly who I've become." He glared, fists clenching. "You don't belong here anymore." "And yet," I whispered, "I'm the only one who does." I picked up the envelope, turning toward the door. "The police will be here by morning. I hope your whiskey keeps you warm in jail." But before I could reach the door, his hand shot out, grabbing my arm hard enough to bruise. "You're not going anywhere."
Lena gasped.
"Ethan, let her go." I twisted out of his grip and shoved him back. He stumbled, catching himself against the desk, rage flashing in his eyes. "You'll regret this," he hissed. Lightning flared again, casting his shadow tall and monstrous on the wall. I backed away, my heart thudding.
"No, Ethan."
"You will." At that moment, the power cut out. The entire house went black. For a second, there was only the sound of rain hammering the roof and the echo of waves crashing outside. Then, somewhere in the dark, I heard his voice, low, venomous. "You think the police will believe a washed-up woman with no job, no husband, and no credibility?" My flashlight flickered on. His face appeared in the beam. Wild, sneering, desperate. "You forged my name," I said, holding his gaze. "You stole my house. And now you've assaulted me. There are cameras, Ethan. Security cameras you never bothered to check." His face drained of color. "You're lying." "Am I?" I lifted my phone, showing him the live feed. Every word, every threat, recorded and backed up. The storm outside howled louder, shaking the windows as if nature itself was on my side. He stared at me, realization dawning slowly, the kind of realization that cuts deeper than anger. "You planned this," he whispered. I smiled faintly.
"No, Ethan."
"You did. I just learned how to finish what you started." Then, without another word, I walked out into the rain, the storm soaking through my clothes but somehow making me feel alive, reborn. Behind me, I could hear Lena crying, her voice breaking through the thunder. I wanted to go back, to comfort her, but I knew she needed to face what she'd allowed to happen. The wind lashed my face as I reached the car. The headlights illuminated the driveway just as the first police cruiser turned onto the street, red and blue lights flashing like judgment. I watched from a distance as the officers approached the door. Ethan's silhouette appeared in the window, his movements frantic. Lena met them first, clutching the envelope I'd left behind. As they stepped inside, I leaned against the car door, the storm raging around me, and closed my eyes. The thunder rolled again, not violent this time, but cleansing. Some storms don't destroy. They reveal. And by the time this one passed, Ethan's carefully built lies would be stripped bare, just like the beach after high tide, raw, exposed, impossible to hide. I started the engine, the sound cutting through the rain. The road ahead shimmered with reflections of lightning. For the first time in years, I wasn't running away. I was driving toward the end, and my freedom. By the time the storm faded, the world outside had turned eerily still, the kind of silence that comes only after chaos has screamed itself empty. The sea was calmer now, breathing softly against the shore, and the air smelled of rain and salt and endings. When I pulled up to the beach house the next morning, police cars were still parked out front. The flashing lights looked almost muted against the gray dawn. I stepped out of the car, my boots sinking into damp sand, and felt something deep inside me settle. Not peace exactly, but something close to it. One of the officers, a woman with tired eyes and a calm tone, met me by the porch. "Miss Carson? We've taken Mr. Lewis into custody. Your sister is inside. She's shaken." I nodded, my throat tight. "Thank you." Inside, the house felt different. Quieter. The air was heavy with the scent of whiskey and wet wood. The chaos of last night lingered. A broken glass near the counter, a chair knocked over, a puddle of rainwater on the floor. But it was mine again. Lena sat on the sofa, wrapped in one of my old blankets, her face pale and swollen from crying. When she saw me, her eyes filled with tears all over again. "Arya," her voice cracked. "I'm so sorry." I took a seat across from her. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The rain tapped gently on the windows, as if reminding us the world was still turning. "You knew, didn't you?" I asked finally. My tone wasn't angry, just hollow. "You knew he'd changed the papers." She nodded slowly. "Not at first. He said it was temporary, just until you got back on your feet. But then he started talking about selling the place, renting it out, taking over everything. When I tried to argue, her voice broke. He said he'd tell everyone I was complicit if I spoke up." I stared at her, my sister, the same girl who once helped me build sandcastles right outside this very house. I wanted to scream, to shake her, to ask how she could let this happen. But when I looked closer, all I saw was fear, the kind of fear I'd once known too well. She whispered, "I was trapped, Arya. I didn't know how to stop him." I took a long breath, forcing my shoulders to relax. "You stop them by standing up. Even when it terrifies you." Tears streamed down her cheeks. "You were always the brave one. I thought he'd change. I thought love could fix him." A bitter smile touched my lips. "Love doesn't fix monsters, Lena. It just hides their teeth until they bite." For a long time, we just sat there, two sisters surrounded by the ghosts of choices that had nearly broken us. Then an officer stepped inside with a clipboard. "Miss Carson, I'll need your signature confirming that you've received the house keys and that the property's secure." The words felt like music. I took the pen, my hand steady for the first time in months. When I signed my name, Arya Carson, bold and final, it felt like sealing something much deeper than a document. It was the closing of a wound. After the officers left, I walked through every room. My fingers brushed along the walls, the furniture, the photos that had somehow survived untouched. Each creak of the floorboards seemed to whisper, "You came back." By afternoon, the clouds began to break apart, streaks of sunlight spilling across the waves. I opened the balcony doors and stepped out. The ocean stretched endlessly before me, powerful, merciless, and yet forgiving in its rhythm. I closed my eyes and let the wind rush through my hair. The fear, the anger, the heartbreak, it all began to wash away with the tide. For years, I had built my life around the people I wanted to save: my ex-husband, who used me until I was hollow, my sister, who leaned on me until she broke under someone else's weight. I had lost myself trying to be their shelter. Now I understood. You can't be a home for someone else when your own foundation is cracked. As the sun dipped lower, painting the sky gold, Lena joined me on the balcony. She looked small against the vastness of the horizon. "They said Ethan will face charges," she said softly. "Forgery, fraud, assault." I nodded. "He'll have time to think about all the things he tried to destroy." She hesitated. "Will you ever forgive me?" I didn't answer right away. The waves crashed softly against the rocks below, filling the silence between us. "Forgiveness isn't something I can give yet," I said finally. "But I'm not angry anymore. That's a start." She nodded, tears glinting in her eyes. "I'll make things right. Somehow." "Then start by making yourself free," I said quietly. "Don't ever let someone else speak for you again." We stood there together for a while, watching the horizon. For the first time, the air between us didn't feel heavy with secrets, just quiet understanding. As evening deepened, I brewed 2 cups of coffee, the same way we used to when we were kids, sneaking sips of Mom's blend, pretending to be adults. We drank in silence, listening to the waves. Then, a sound broke the calm, the distant crunch of tires on gravel. I turned, instincts sharp again. A dark sedan had stopped near the driveway. My chest tightened. A familiar silhouette stepped out.
Ethan.
For a moment, all the warmth drained from my body. He shouldn't have been there. He was supposed to be in custody. Lena's hand found mine. Oh God, Arya. But then, from the car behind his, 2 uniformed officers stepped out as well. Ethan wasn't free. He was being escorted. One of them opened the trunk, retrieving a small metal case. Ethan's expression was grim. No arrogance now, no smirk. Just defeat. He looked up at me on the porch. They let me come get my things. I folded my arms, unmoving. You don't have anything here anymore. He laughed once, bitterly. You always did think you were better than everyone. Enjoy your empty house. Better? I said softly.
No.
Just finally awake. He stared for a long moment, then turned away. The officers followed him inside, staying close as he gathered a few belongings from the study. When he walked out again, rain had started to fall lightly, soft, cleansing. He paused on the steps. You'll regret this someday. I met his gaze, calm and unwavering. Maybe, but at least it'll be my regret. He left without another word. The sound of the car faded into the distance, swallowed by the sea. When the last echo was gone, Lena exhaled shakily. Is it really over? I looked toward the horizon where the sun broke through the fading clouds, scattering light across the water. Yes, I said. For him. But for us, it's just beginning. That night, I lit the fireplace and sat by it, wrapped in a blanket. The house creaked softly around me, no longer a place of fear, but of peace. I opened my laptop, the same one I'd used to find the proof that saved me, and typed a single line at the top of a blank document. Sometimes, the storm doesn't come to destroy you. It comes to clear the path so you can finally see who you are. I saved it under a new title, The House by the Waves. And as the firelight flickered across the room, I realized the truth I had fought so hard to forget. Revenge wasn't my victory. Reclamation was. Outside, the tide was rising again, steady, relentless, beautiful. And for the first time in years, I wasn't afraid of the storm.